Welcome, family. We're so glad that you're here. You've joined us this Shabbat. What a great day to come together and be in his presence. I'm excited about that. As you see, this seat is empty, but hopefully it will be filled very shortly. Yes. But that doesn't stop us. I want to welcome everybody that is online, and welcome. Thank you for welcoming each other too. And so when you guys greet each other, it's like a hug.
With a holy kiss.
A hug with a holy kiss. Thank you, Irma. Yeah, that's good. So what we're going to do today on this Torah portion, I'm going to move the screen as it needs to be. We are going to go ahead and pray, and then we are going to read. So I am going to start, and I'm going to have Irma pray.
Sovereign Father, you are so awesome, so wonderful, so perfect. And we just thank you for another day that you've given us, another day to repent, another day to worship you and exalt your name, because you're worthy of all the praise. And now as we study your Torah, Father, that we may also apply it to our lives and our walk, Father. And we're so happy, Father, for your Shabbat. This is a day that you come and you join us, Father, and we're happy to sit here and just bask in your word. And we thank you for those that are here and those that are on their way, that you will keep them safe. And we just ask that you bless every single person, Father, and that they will all, Father, may your Torah just go out, Amen. Father, and to all our family members, Father, and that they will also, Father, know the truth, and the truth will set them free. Amen. And we thank you for everything in Yeshua's name. Amen.
In Yeshua's name. Hallelujah. And now we're going to go ahead and read our Torah portion. Does anybody know what it's supposed to be today? It is Vayeshev, and it is Genesis 37:1 through 40:23. So Joy is going to read chapter 37 for us. So you guys open your word up and join with us. Let's get that spoken word out there.
Amen.
And shift the atmosphere.
So before I read, I just want to read this little blessing. That's
yes, do that.
It's praised are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, Amen. Who gives the Torah of truth and the good news of salvation to his people Israel and to all the peoples through his Son, Yeshua the Messiah, our Lord. For God so loved the world that he gave us his only Son.
Amen. Yes, Yeshua.
So Amen. Thank you, Father, for that. In Yeshua's name. So, Yaakov continued living in the land where his father had lived as a foreigner, the land of Canaan. Here's the history of Yaakov. When Jehoshaphat was 17 years old, he used to pasture the flock with his brothers, even though he was still a boy. Once when he was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, he brought a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph the most of all of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long-sleeved robe. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they began to hate him and reached the point where they couldn't even talk with him in a civil manner. Joseph had a dream, which he told his brothers, that made them hate him all the more. He said to them, "Listen, I will tell you about this dream of mine. We were tying up bundles of wheat in the field when suddenly my bundle got up by itself and stood upright. Then your bundles came, gathered around mine, and prostrated themselves before it." His brothers retorted, "Yes, you will certainly be our king. You'll do a great job of bossing us around." And they hated him still more for his dreams and for what he said. He had another dream which he told his brothers. "Here I had another dream, and there were the sun, the moon, and 11 stars prostrating themselves before me." He told his father too, as well as his brothers, but his father rebuked him. "What is this dream you have had? Do you really expect me, your mother, and your brothers to come and prostrate ourselves before you on the ground?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. After this, when his brothers had gone to pasture their father's sheep in Shechem, Israel asked Joseph, "Aren't your brothers pasturing the sheep in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them," he answered. "Here I am," he said to him. "Go now and see whether things are going well with your brothers and with the sheep, and bring word back to me." So he sent him away from the Hebron valley, and he went to Shechem. where a man found him wandering around in the countryside. The man asked him, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for my brothers," he answered. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the sheep?" The man said, "They left here because I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. They spotted him in the distance, and before he had arrived where they were, they had already plotted to kill him. They said to each other, "Look, this dreamer is coming. So now let's kill him and throw him into one of these water cisterns here. Then we'll say some wild animal devoured him. We'll see then what becomes of his dreams." But when Reuben heard of this, he saved him from being destroyed by them. He said, "We shouldn't take his life. Don't shed blood," Reuben said. "Throw him into the cistern here in the wilds, but don't lay hands on him yourselves." He intended to rescue him from them later and restore him to his father. So it was then that Joseph arrived to be with his brothers. They stripped off his robe, the long-sleeved robe he was wearing, and took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty without water in it. Then they sat down to eat their meals, but as they looked up, they saw in front of them a caravan of Ishmaelim coming from Gilead, their camels loaded with aromatic gum, healing resin, and opium, on their way down to Egypt. Yehuda said to his brothers, "What advantage is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelim instead of putting him to death with our own hands. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh." His brothers paid attention to him. So when the Midianim merchants passed by, they drew and lifted up Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 1/2 pound of silver shekels to the Ishmaelim, who took Joseph out onto Egypt. Reuben returned to the cistern, and upon seeing that Joseph wasn't in there, tore his clothes in mourning. He returned his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I go now?" They took Joseph's robe, killed a male goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. Then they sent the long-sleeved robe and brought it to their father, saying, "We found this. Do you know if it's your son's robe or not?" He recognized it and cried, "It is my son's robe. Some wild animal has torn Joseph in pieces and eaten him." Yaakov tore his clothes and, putting sackcloth around his waist, mourned his son for many days. Though all his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, he refused any consolation, saying, "No, I will go down to the grave to my son, mourning." And his father wept for him. In Egypt, the Midianim sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, a captain of the guard.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Joy.
Of course. Anytime. I love it.
I love this Torah portion, but I love all of them. But Genesis,
Yeah.
the Torah portions in Genesis are just, they're all good. But anyway, so here we have this Torah portion. And Yaakov is actually, it is said, tradition says he's about 108 years old. And Isaac is still living at 168. And he lives 12 more years, by the way. And this is said to have occurred about 9 years after they arrived back in the land. So that sort of gives you context. We're on Vayeshev, and we're looking at this life. And if anybody ever says, "Why do I have such a hard life?" all they have to do is look at Yaakov. I mean, he went from one thing after another to another to another, the injustices and other things that were done to him. And it just, when one trial seems to be over, there's another one. Can anyone relate?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Oh my! But you know what? Yah's had him, and it said that it always said he was man of the tents. He didn't depart from that, and so he always looked to him. That didn't waver. That didn't change, and so we praise Yah for that. And he endured whatever he had to endure, even with loss, with cheating, with stealing. He did what he was supposed to do. And finally, we get to this Vayeshev, and everybody, what does it mean? That he dwelt, he settled. Well, I want to look at the difference in that, because we have this connection to chapter 36 when we're doing this as well. And chapter 36, the previous chapter, is about Esau. and it's talking about Esau's generations. So we're going to look at that in a moment. But I really think that when we put this together, the house of Jacob has had a lot of dry, dead bones. And maybe even at this time, there was a lot of dry, dead bones and that needed to be restored, that needed to be awakened. Because of all the sons, were all the sons in line with Yah? Were they following his word? Were they really delving in and being men of the tents? Or had they wandered astray? Well, I think it's just like we see now. We have family, we have community that need to come alive. And when we come together, that's when there's power, and that's when his glory is made known. So those dry bones need to live. They need to live in the house of Jacob, Yaakov, yesterday and today. We declare that, right? Okay, so we have this story that's really a foreshadowing of events of our Messiah. Oh my, I included in your notes, hopefully we'll get there, about just a few of the similarities of Messiah. But it's a prophetic of things that have happened in the past, but even things that are going to continue to happen, and a people, because we are supposed to be a people who function as Joseph. We're supposed to go save the house. We live in families and communities that are lost. And then what is our job? Our job isn't to sit back and complain and wish for a different leader. Our job is to go out there and follow his, be in tune, be discerning his word, so that we can go save the house, so that we can bring people in. And the problem is that not only do we have the mission to go out beyond our own home and make disciples of the world, maybe where the Esau lies, but we have to get our own house in order, because our own house has people that don't get it and sometimes even undermine what Yahweh's trying to do.
Amen. That's right.
And that's our Torah portion. And when we look at it, it says these are the generations. The word is Elei Toldot, and that's the 10th and the last Toldot, the last generations in the chapter in Genesis. So is it a mistake? No. And 10 is going to come up over and over and over in this Torah portion. We're going to get to that, because when we look at the genealogy, we look at Esau's genealogy, and what did they do in chapter 36? The whole chapter is committed to it. And then we look at at Jacob's, and it says, and there's Joseph. You're like, wait, there's more than him that's around. What's up with that? Well, maybe we need to look a little bit more closely at that, because Yah always has a reason and a purpose. I really think that you can't separate Esau from what we're seeing even here, because we're going to be men of the field, or we're going to be men of the word, men of the tents. And that's, the battle is still raging. It's still going on in our homes, and it's still going on everywhere we look. So we have to understand it's foreshadowing the end, because we live in the field. What's the field?
The people.
It's the world. It's the people. We live where there's beasts that lie. Mm-hmm. And so the ultimate beast, I would believe, is Esau, who's a shadow picture of the anti-Messiah. So Joseph even stands against Esau today. And so let's get into this word so that we can understand. And we've done Vayeshev before, but we're going to dig into it for a few minutes again. And why? Because if we don't understand the details, then in Joseph's life, we're not even really going to understand our own calling and what we're facing, because the enemy's battle plan, he does the same thing over and over. Would y'all agree with that? Mm-hmm. He does the same thing over and over, and it's time for us to rise up. And we all, if we call ourselves believers in Messiah Yeshua, we need to take the mantle of Joseph and be those who save the house. So, and Jacob dwelt. So dwelt comes from H3427 Yeshav. And I want to break it apart before we jump in. That vav in the front means and to me it connects in two ways. That and is like, if you say this and, then you would want to do what came before the and. So to me, that immediately connects us to chapter 36 and Esau's line. So we need to pay attention. Why? Because the wheat is and the tares are sown together. The tares aren't necessarily sown on purpose, but they're sewn together. And Esau represents that. If he represents the anti-Messiah has his own kingdom. And his own kingdom is going to come against the kingdom of Yah. And that's going to be represented in Joseph and Esau. So you've got to connect it that way. But to me, it also connects heaven to earth. So you can take that Hebrew definition and understand as well that when you break this whole word Vayeshev apart, it's also going to reveal the character of Yah. So here we have to dwell and remain and abide, to endure, to stay, to position. And when it talks about this position, it actually means to be enthroned, like to sit on a throne as a king and ruler. Now, does Joseph at any time sit at a throne as a king and ruler? Yeah, he does. He is second only to Pharaoh. But even Yaakov in the land represents one kingdom. And he is the head of that kingdom. He is the one that where he is Israel. He is Israel. So understand that this Yeshav has this idea of enduring and positioning, even as a ruler on a throne. It indicates there's a season in front of us where you and I are going to sit as leaders and even as rulers of a kingdom, because we're supposed to be co-heirs with our Messiah Yeshua. If we are his bride, then we are going to rule with him. We're going to rule with him, right? So it even represents our position if we are supposed to be kings and priests as the bride of our Messiah. 1 Corinthians 6, I didn't write down the verse. It says, don't you know that you're even going to judge the angels? Well, who judges? It would be a ruler. It would be a judge. It would be somebody who sits in an area of a position. But there's something also in this word by Yeshav that we need to understand. And this is where I'm going to go today, a little bit different than I have in other years, is that it means to give a dwelling to. So I want to look at this. We always look at the physical of Joseph's life. But I want us to think of this idea more spiritually, to give a dwelling to provide a dwelling for another. Now, if Yaakov, if we are supposed to provide a dwelling, who is that other we are providing a dwelling for? Could it be that Jacob has been strategically positioned, that he has been enthroned to provide a dwelling for another, to provide a dwelling for the presence of the Most High, the presence of Yahweh? And does that not also line up that we are living, walking Torah scrolls, that we are that mobile tabernacle that carries that ark of his presence? Because where is his presence supposed to be? We are supposed to be those that carry his presence. So maybe he's come into land. It talks about him dwelling in the land because now he's come to the place where he is going to carry Yah's presence. Not that he hasn't, but now he's stationed. He's stationed in position. He's dwelling, providing a dwelling for Yah. So that because the spiritual is real, and we are supposed to be the living stones tabernacle, walking and breathing and dwelling in his name. So Yaakov and now Joseph have been placed here to dwell, to provide a place for somebody else, something else, someone, Yeshua, to dwell in them. But do you not know that when you're not following, if you can dwell just as Esau is dwelling, and somebody can be enthroned in your life, a spiritual presence, and it's not Yahweh? And I think that's what we see in Esau. Esau is dwelling at the same time Joseph is dwelling, but he's not carrying. He's not carrying Yeshua. He's not carrying our Messiah. He's not carrying Yah. He's not carrying and walking out the covenant. So there's something else that's filling his heart and life. And we have that same thing. What is filling us? So many are lukewarm, but if you're lukewarm or you think you're here or there or wherever, you're really not in his kingdom. You're another kingdom. You're just completely deceived about it. So here we have this idea. Who's dwelling in us? Joseph, Yaakov, and the brothers are supposed to be that too. They're supposed to be the dwelling place for the Most High. They're supposed to be the dwelling place for the great I Am. Also, this term has this military aspect to it. Why? Because if you're dwelling, people always want to come and take the territory, physically and spiritually. So people are going to want, the enemy's always going to want to come take the territory. So what does that mean needs to happen? That means we need to be guarding, we need to protecting, and we need to defend against all those that would try to remove us from his presence. All of those that would try to remove us from abiding with him, from enduring with him, and from remaining with him. And the circumstances in our lives, the circumstances in Joseph's life, don't you think the enemy thought that, this and this and this is going to happen to him? He's going to walk away. Did it happen? Yaakov's life, what we just talked about, this and this and this happened. Did he walk away from being the dwelling place of his presence? Absolutely not. Now look at your life. I bet you guys could start listing, and there could be many events you could say this and this and this and this. So my question is there someone else dwelling that's not Yah in your hearts, or have you endured because you've been fighting and you've been guarding and you've been protecting the territory, that you've been defending what Yah's given you, defending his word, defending his covenant, defending the truth, and living out loud, even though everybody else is like, you better not do that, or that, whatever they say a lot. So Yaakov and Joseph are there for a reason. They're defending against Esau. Hello. Do you want to hold Sasha?
I'm in the picture now, huh?
Yep.
No, she wants to be with her mama.
I know, it's sort of hard. I've got to use my left hand.
That's not hard.
Whatever. So here we have, okay, for you guys that don't know, he's left-handed, but I'm not. Using my left hand is a little awkward. So here we have this idea. So when we dwell, do we have a purpose in our dwelling? If we sit, do we have a purpose in our sitting? Yes. We're not just chilling. This is good. I'm good. No, that's not what it's about. We are supposed to be ruling and reigning with it, like on a throne. We have an express purpose, because what are we supposed to be positioned as? Everybody say it. We say it all the time here. Priests and kings, right? Ruling and reigning, taking dominion, going out and making disciples of nations. It's our job. So Jacob is sitting in the land to rule it, and Isaac was in the land to rule it. And Abraham was in the land to rule it. You are in the land to rule it. We keep letting circumstances move us instead of us move the circumstances. What do I mean by that? Because we forget that we rule and reign through Yeshua Messiah, that his name is greater than every other name, and that every knee must bow to his name, that everything must submit because he is Yahweh. So therefore, when the circumstances come, instead of accepting how the circumstances move us, we need to remember who we are and do something about it. So let
me just say something too. Think about Joseph. You were talking about even finding our purpose in the sitting, because most people probably don't think that they're going to be fulfilling any purpose when they sit. I mean, in our society, what do? A lot of times when we sit, then we're busy. We're scrolling, or we're watching TV, or we might just be reading a random book, just a novel or something like that. And I was thinking about this whole concept of Joseph with the sitting. Mm-hmm. And not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with doing any of those different things. Sometimes we just got to make our brain just shut off and chill.
Like
for a little
you did
bit.
last night.
Yeah, exactly.
Right there in that position.
Just
came out at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and you were still
chilling. Okay, so
asleep.
But they accused Joseph of being a dreamer. But what is one of the ways that we fulfill our purposes as a king and a priest, filling that position of royalty that comes before the throne and intercedes before the throne of the Most High, coming into his courtroom? It's that he's given us an imagination that causes us, even when we're simply doing scrolling through our stuff and watching a movie or whatever, and thinking that what purpose, how much bigger am I getting some details? Maybe there's a reason I'm watching this thing right now. Maybe there's a reason why I'm connecting with this, because I find in my own life that when I'm going through stuff, then all of a sudden, sometime in the next few days, I may actually be pulling upon the stuff that I just looked at when I'm talking to somebody. And when I'm putting together pieces of life or a message or connecting, however it might be, these are little tidbits that Yah puts in our life for us to connect at the right time which is part of our purpose. That there's this theme of the now that is actually prophetic, and it seems mundane. It seems like, well, it's just a television program, or it's just a YouTube video, or it's just my work, that I'm focused on in front of me. And yet in the details are some things that the Father's saying, now remember this, take this. I'm going to have you remember this. It's just going to go into the recesses of your mind, and it's going to come out at the right time in the right place, because the string of the prophetic is in our life. And Joseph was a dreamer because the stream of the prophetic was in his life. I think he dwelt on those dreams a lot. But how much more did he break it down in minute details? Did it go the way he was probably dreaming or thinking? No. It still had to be walked out.
Right.
But anyway, I couldn't help but see some things, which is amazing in this Torah portion.
Okay. Thank you, Pastor John.
It probably took you a long
Well,
ways
let's
away
continue.
from your
I'm going to go
thoughts.
right back to where I was, because we're continuing to break this word Vayeshev down before we are catapulted forward. And that means, this vav that I talked about means and. It's also, as it's connected to the spiritual things and the earthly things, it's a doorway. And something is either going to be allowed to come into your life and be made manifest or not. So, And then you have the yod, and it has this future, this idea of a future, something in the future. It's the prefix it's the column perfect tense. We're not going to go into that, but it has this idea of this continuing action in the past or the future. So it's continuing on. And then the final sheen and vet, that means to return or to be restored, like in teshuva. You hear that root in there. So the title Vayeshev reveals that Jacob is dwelling in the land, but it's prophetic, saying that there's a future where he's going to restore Jacob to dwell, to sit, to rule, to make a place for his presence in the land. So it's speaking to us too, because we're going to return, and we are supposed to be ruling and reigning with him, walking with him, doing what he does. But if he is not enthroned, if we haven't put him on the throne of our lives, if we put ourselves on the throne of our lives or something else, then we are not positioned to walk in authority. We're not positioned to rule. We're not positioned to reign. And Esau, the enemy, has overpowered us and lives within, and we don't even realize it. So we are called, Jacob is called, Joseph, all of us, we're called to rule and reign, to teshuva, so that we can get our inheritance. Isaiah 10:21 says, the remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, into the mighty God. So now I want you to understand that the enemy counterfeits everything. And what does a counterfeit look like? If you have a diamond ring and you have the fake diamond, the cubic zirconium, does it look way off, or is it very, very close? So a counterfeit is going to look very much like the real thing, but it's not the real thing. So when we attempt to walk through any door or any other door to get to his presence, to dwell, to sit, to get whatever we want, if we attempt to walk through any door other than Messiah Yeshua, other than the restoration of the whole house, walking as one, because that's what we need to do, is walk as one, as a kingdom of priests, as a kingdom of kings, then we are, if we're walking through any other door, we are actually serving a counterfeit. Okay. So if there's a return to the land, but you're stripped of your identity, are you any good in the land? Absolutely not. So Esau, we've already talked about, there's two kingdoms here. There's two kingdoms that are establishing. There's two kingdoms that are dwelling right there. And each one has endured to this moment, and each one actually has made a dwelling place for another. And one of the other is going to be enthroned there in the land and in our lives. So Vayeshev, one more time, I told you we wanted to look at a little bit more spiritually, is like this spiritual gateway that's going to be opened to the spirit of Yah for him to dwell, or it's going to that spirit of anti-Messiah for him to dwell, not because one spirit or the other is going to fill us. Remember, the wheat and the tares grow at the same time. The counterfeits being raised up at the same time. And also, if you go back to Genesis 36, 6 through 7, it says here, then Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and the household, and his livestock, and all his cattle, and all his property which he had acquired in the land of Canaan, and went to another land far away from his brother Jacob, for the possessions that had become too great for them to live together in the land where they resided. They could not support them because of their livestock. So Esau lived in the hill country of Seir. Esau's Edom. So did you just catch it right there? I've talked about the wheat and tares dwelling together. It says here, for a time, Esau and Yaakov were living together. But Esau goes his way. Yaakov is established in the land, and always a reason and a purpose. But we need to understand that Esau has become intertangled, intermixed, interwoven, in his spirit has been interwoven into Yah's people, as well as people that aren't his people, because in the beginning, Jacob masqueraded for a time as Esau, but now Esau masquerades as Jacob. And when Joseph comes to the forefront, it sort of brings forth this revelation of who's serving whom. And are we being a people of living stones that are making a dwelling place for his presence? Are we making a dwelling place for another presence? 1 Corinthians 6:19 says, "What, you know not that you are the body, the temple of the Ruach HaKodesh, which is in you, which ye have of Yah, and ye are not your own." We're not our own. We're supposed to be that tabernacle, that temple. So, but he goes about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Yeshua is always the answer. So I want us to look at the sibling rivalry. I think I gave you some things on Yosef. I don't think we're going to go through those, but just know that Yosef and 7 and 10 and Shabbat and all of these things, there's lots of ideas in there that we can take. And if we have time, we're going to jump back and look at that. But for now, we're going to jump forward. So the conflict between Joseph and his brothers. Now, we always hear, I get so frustrated when people talk and degrade any of our imperfect patriarchs, and they are. But sometimes we take it too far. I'm not, and when I correct things like I've corrected, in my opinion about Jacob and things, it's not because I think they're perfect, because they're not. There's no one perfect. But I even think that Joseph, if you constantly say he was belittling and he was tattling and he was doing this and this and this all the time, I think that is incorrect, because there was something when he was also being a man of the tents. He was being trained. He wanted to look like Yahweh. Was he immature? Yes, he was immature. And so there are things that immaturity brings, but he was also trying to do the will of his father. And what do we see in Yeshua? He doesn't try. He does the will of Father. He does the will of Yah. He is Yah. So we see that in both ways. So what is the catalyst possibly of what this is when it talks about him telling? Maybe the text, we read it not quite correctly, because Joseph has no mother. So who do you think is mothering him and has been mothering him? It's probably Bilhah, because that was Rachel's handmaiden. And remember, he's the son of the beloved wife. So in all probability, he was hanging out with those, what, if you want to call them wives, concubines, I don't know what the name of Bilhah and Zilpah would be, but it's one of that. But he's in that household. Now, because the beloved wife has died, and it's been very clear that Yaakov doesn't always look fondly on Leah. What do you think natural human would do? Especially ladies. I'm sorry, we do it. We compete with each other. We do it. Let's be real. They're going to be, oh, maybe I'm going to be the favored wife now. Maybe me and my sons will be in the position to take over. So when you look at this, it brings this conflict of Joseph and his brothers. We can find, since he is probably hanging around Bilhah and Zilpah a lot more, because mom's gone, The sages actually teach that Bilhah attempts to gain ascendancy over the house along with her sons Dan and Naphtali. That is automatically going to be a conflict, automatically. So if he's hanging out and he's with those boys and they want to rise to position, what is the natural thing that the four boys of Bilhah and Zilpah are going to do? They're going to try to undermine him and get him off path, off course, or do whatever they need to do so that Joseph could be distracted or they could tarnish his name. Let me ask you a question. When people are serving Yah, what does the world want to do? And even other believers, what do they want to do? They want to eat them. They want to tarnish your name. I cannot tell you how many times in the past, as you guys know, that we as pastors, and I'm just using us as an example, but I guarantee you guys go through it. You've heard things, you've been told things. I guarantee you guys in this room have even heard things and been told things about us, about our son, about life of worship, because what does the enemy try to do? And he can use good people to do it. He tries to if there's headway in the kingdom, the enemy doesn't like it, and so he's going to try to tarnish the name. He's going to try to tarnish the character so that it will pull other people away from truth. And so is it any different back then? No, absolutely not. So here we have this conflict and between Dan and Naphtali and possibly Joseph and the other, especially those boys. We don't see it as pronounced as much on Leah's boys, sons, but we do see it, especially with them, because it says he speak things to get him off the right path. Okay, I already said that, because they understood what had been written in the heavens, what had been written in the unchangeable gospel that's in the stars, and they understood by the coat and so many other things that have been happening, even the talk, and even knowing that Joseph was willing to sit down and study the word, that he was willing to be part of the covenant, that he was willing to carry on the name, that he was willing to do what Yahweh called him to do. Well, that's going to create a jealousy even of itself, because he's willing to put in the work and to do the work to carry on the household name so that Yah's presence can dwell in him. And the other guys don't want to because it takes work. People nowadays don't want to because it takes work. You don't just exist. You have to pursue. You have to chase after him. He chases after us, and listen and do his will. So here we have this prophetic thing happening here. These guys didn't want to follow Torah. They didn't. When Joseph would try to lead his brothers straight into the covenant, what would their reaction be? Who do you think you are? You're younger than us. Who do you think you are? If he tried to say, hey, this is what Yah has said, because he's being trained what the word is. Even though the word hadn't been written, we have the tense of Shem and Eber and all these others that have come before that are carrying that word. And so he knows the word. And when you try to speak life into something or bring loving correction even to somebody or point out something, usually it's received, especially with adults, who do you think you are to tell me what to do? If he is holding his brothers accountable for the words and the actions that they're doing, they're not going to like it. They're not going to like it at all. So let's break some things apart a little bit. So we have Bilhah, which meaning her name. I think I put it on y'all's and I didn't put it on mine. Troubled. I need to put that in my notes. Okay. Anyway, troubled. And then Zilpah's name means? Trickling and troubled. Is that prophetic? Well, I don't know. Maybe so. It might be hard to be married to somebody whose name represents being troubled and being trickling. Now, because it's mixture. And where do you choose your bride and your bridegroom? Are you going to waste away? Are you going to be, use that trouble and get into your business, get into your life, getting into your children? What kind of children will you bear if that's what you represent in your life? Because you're going to model life after your children. You're going to speak life or death over your children because the power of words, which we're going to talk about. So I want us to break this down and understand, could it be that the wives and the sons worked to wear down even the moral fiber of Joseph, or tried to at least? Maybe, because now we're going to look at the words a little bit more closely. And we've talked about it. 17 years old, he was young. But if we look a little bit more closely at the words, maybe it points to the brothers are the ones with the evil report. because what Joseph is doing is what his dad told him to do. And his dad has said, what are we supposed to do? We judge the fruit of the house. Have you ever judged fruit? And somebody says, judge not lest you be judged. But yet we are supposed to look at the fruit we acquire, because if it's bad fruit, we don't eat it. We don't partake. We don't hang out with the rotting fruit. Now, we're not talking about life or death and heaven and hell for those that are around us, but we are supposed to be fruit judgers. But when you're fruit judgers, then a lot of times the finger's pointed back at you saying, what do you think you're doing? So when we look at this word and we understand that if Joseph is supposed to judge the house, to get the evil tongue out of his house, to stop the compromising, because what happens when a house is compromised? It falls. It will fall. It will destroy the house, or the house will become something that it was never supposed to be, a house to house another spirit. So from Bilhah, we have Dan and Naphtali. From Zilpah, we have Gad and Asher. So let's look at their names. Dan is judge. Naphtali means my strife or wrestling. From Bethal, to be twisted, to spin, to be deceitful. So we live in an environment where there's deceit everywhere, and everything we hear, anything you see, you can't even judge if it's real or not anymore because of technology, because of AI. It's been manipulated and controlled, so you don't even know what's real. And the enemy uses it and to try to hypnotize or bring us into a place of complacency. And then we have Gad, which is the Gimel Dalet, which means a troop or my fortune, to cut, to penetrate, to invade, or to attack. And Asher, it's rendered happy, to go straight or to be straight or upright. So if we bring those together, and we put those names together, we can conclude that Yah would judge them for their strife, deceitful twisting, while attempting to penetrate that twisting with that deceit, or divide the upright or straight a walk of Jacob and Joseph. So maybe that is what they're attempting to do, is compromise the integrity of the house by not following the word. Now, what's really here, if you look at this, it's dibatam ra'ah. It's aleph tav dibatam ra'ah. Now, if you see aleph tav attached before the word, and it's attached, guys, what is it really saying? What the bad report in the tongue? Dibatam ra'ah. Because the suffix tam is the third person, which means there. There is plural, guys. Oh, sorry. There is plural. And not one person. This bad report shows a plural, somebody plural, not a singular person is giving the bad report. Joseph is one. The brothers are more than one. Okay, then let's look at this. So the suffix, it is plural, and the aleph tav is the appendage in the front of the phrase. So it sounds like they're trying to give a bad report of the aleph tav. That they are the ones that are disparaging the word, the covenant, Yeshua, who is the word. They are the ones that are giving the bad report. As we've talked many times before, you get accused of doing what you're doing. I mean, the ones that are accusing, I'll re-say that. The ones that are accusing you of doing something are doing that very thing. Mm-hmm. So by not recognizing that this word is plural, maybe Joseph isn't the one that's reporting bad, because is Joseph going to give a bad report over the aleph tav, over Yeshua? Absolutely not. He's not going to do that. But there's slander. There's against him, against Joseph, but against Yahweh himself. And then we look at this, when it talks about Joseph being a child of his old age, it talks about he was a spiritual son. He was a spiritual son. He wasn't somebody that's laid back. He was a type of Messiah. Joseph was a foreshadow of the aleph tav. John 7:5-7. Does anybody want to read that? I think it's on your papers.
For not even his brothers believed in him. So Yeshua said to them, my time is not yet here, but your time is always ready. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it, that its deeds are evil.
Okay. So it sounds very reminiscent of what Joseph's going through, right? Were some of Yeshua's deeds called evil and misconstrued and sort of twisted? But that's not what he was doing, but he was being accused of doing stuff. Have you been accused of doing things and somebody's twisted your words and twisted your actions into something that it's not? Because we're going to need that video in just a moment.
Do you want me to put it up on that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it'd be great if they could see that too. Okay, there's a video link in your page. We're going to try to play it here because I want you to understand, if Yahweh is being torn up in your house, the children, the grandchildren, the generations are coming. If they're disparaging his name, what are the results that are going to happen in that house? Jacob had to put a stop to it. Those that believe have to say, no, the line is drawn here. You will no longer speak evil of my Yah. You will no longer speak evil of what he's doing, of the covenant, of everything else, but they're not going to like that. There's a bad report coming because they do not want to serve him right now. They need to have an adjustment, and they will. Hallelujah. But right now, they're not serving him. They're disparaging Yahweh's name. They're speaking evil against Joseph and him.
Sometimes you have to separate yourself from them too.
Well, you absolutely do. So when you look at that a little bit differently and you break it down into Hebrew, that phrase doesn't necessarily seem like Joseph's doing all this bad stuff. Not saying he was perfect. He probably did some. He's a kid. But there's something going on. So remember, the generations, they're not too far off Lavan. Was Lavan a good guy? No. Remember, I talked about it a couple weeks ago. He's a form of the animus, I himself. And they were in his house. Do you think any behaviors were picked up? It's not too far off Nahor and Terah. So when you're thinking of that, the lineage, there's stuff in your lineage, in your line, where there's been sin. And that's another reason why that door has been opened. And it's important for us to go and say, Father, if my family, if my ancestors, if those that have come before me have done this or this or this, please forgive. Please forgive us. So we need to make sure that we clean house even for those that have gone before us, because we got to put things in order. So let's look at this word lad, because it talks about he's just a lad. Lad is, some scholars attribute it to the word na'ar, which is an indication of the source, a reason why the brothers hate it. But na'ar, do you recognize that? It sounds very close to ner, which it means lamp or light, ner Elohim or ner menorah. So Joseph could have been called a young light or a young lamp when it talks about him being the lad. Most rabbis believe it's most often used to signify a person of special divine selection. Again, so if you have this idea that he's a man of the, Joseph is just like his father. He's a man of the tents, man of the word. He's trying to do the right thing. He's telling what his dad says, go out into the field. He goes, which is the world. He goes out into the world. He does what he's supposed to do. But then he said, I hear people say, well, he's just this bad guy that just tattles. Yet is that really the character? And then when you break it down, you realize he's not the one that's trying to destroy the name of Yahweh. It's the brothers themselves at this time. But what do? Destroy the messenger to destroy the message. If they could destroy Joseph, then they could destroy what he's trying to do, and they could continue doing what they want to do. And that's what happens. So gossip, Lashon Hara. We're going to go to that place. We've talked about it. We're not going to revisit in detail, but I do want us to understand, if the gossip isn't stopped, it brings destruction. Gossip, Lashon Hara, is the murder of character. And oftentimes it's death. It is literal murder, because it's hard to get back a name when somebody has run your name. Or I'm thinking of even Life of Worship right now in Amarillo, and some things that have been said by another group, that it's really hard to restore a name once somebody else has taken hold of it and tried to bring destruction to it. Well, and really disparaged it in every way.
It's childish and it's jealousy.
It is jealousy. But
Yes.
think of the brothers. I mean, how many people do you know that still walk in jealousy and offense and all of that thing, and they're adults? You know what? Sometimes that kid is still in us, unfortunately, doing the wrong thing. But if you listen to it, you're buyers of that gossip. If you allow it to continue and you don't say, that is not true, no, and walk away or correct it, you are still buyers of that Lashon Hara. And there's a lot of evidence that, remember that the words you speak have effect on your body, have effect that on those you speak over, and can bring life or death to everything. And so that frequency that's put out by the very words, by that very Lashon Hara, is going to have effect on the house. It's going to start rotting the house. So what does Jacob need done? What does and he even asked Joseph, come help me. We've got to be fruit judgers. Let me know if something's going on, because we've got to stop the disease and the cancer before it takes over. And that's what we have happening here. So I want us to go to a physical example. I've always told you, I'm going to bring it to you guys. This isn't actually the one I've talked about in the past, but the words of life or death spoken over rice, over plants, over water. You can see physically how it brings life or destroys or sustains. And so we're going to look at this video. Japanese researcher Masaru Emoto conducted an experiment in which he spoke words to water while it was freezing, and the water created crystal shapes distinct to the vibration of each word. And when the words were positive and loving, beautiful shapes appeared, and when the words were negative and harsh, chaotic shapes were formed. If Joseph and Jacob hadn't stopped the Lashon Hara, hadn't stopped the evil speech, hadn't stopped the bad reports of the King of Kings, where would that household be? Could it have taken and been the place where his presence could settle to dwell? Absolutely not. There is absolutely no way, because we become what we say. Joseph stops. He takes that evil report to his dad, and he says, Dad, they're saying stuff about our God, our Yahweh. And the false report is part of that wicked lamp. I did not give you a picture, but I gave you that information of that wicked lamp. Anything that separates brothers, that's ultimately the worst part in that progression that you see in the wicked lamp. Let's read Proverbs 6:16 through 18. Would somebody do that?
There are 6 things Yahweh hates. Yes, 7 which are abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers.
Wow, that sounds like the world, but it sounds like the congregational world as well, doesn't it? Oh, isn't that just terrible? Do you want to be found as part of that wicked lamp?
No.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking. And if you think about this Lashon Hara, and let's go back to this number 10. How many brothers are really doing are destroying Yah's name and have conflict with Joseph right now? How many are there? There are 10. Okay. So 10 are, at least those sons of Zilpah and Bilhah are doing that, but there's still conflict with 10 of the brothers because Benjamin's young. How many spies were there that gave a bad report?
Yeah.
Oh, do we see a theme here? Did it destroy the house? It happened to 40 years because of the words they spoke. It destroyed the house. What would have happened if somebody would have said, don't even speak? If you can't say anything good, don't speak at all. What would have happened? And you think about even at Mount Sinai, what happened? He wanted to make a nation of kingdom of priests and kings. And what did the people do? They were like, no, no, no. And so 10 is what happens when we don't speak life and speak that more abundantly. And then 10 continues in this number of the brothers, because when the brothers come and Joseph is second in charge under Pharaoh, the king, then he takes one of the brothers and says, Simeon stays here. So there's still 10. We're dealing with 10 brothers that are coming and going. So this 10 that really represents, when you have a congregation, 10 men, what kind of men are we going to be? Are we going to be like the spies? Are we going to bring like the brothers with the bad report, which is ultimately those that are going to separate brothers, which is that would run to evil? Are we going to be those gossipers? Are we going to spread forth life or death? Because Joseph had to go ahead and Jacob had to stop the evil reports themselves. And so let's look at that differently. So with that being said, I want us to go ahead. Do we need to mute anything so we don't have double sound issues? I'm going to go ahead and mute on my end.
Mute yours.
Okay. So we're about to play. Will they be able to hear the video online? If I mute.
Should.
Okay. I'm going to put this ear in because I want to play this video just to see how much in danger our house is with bad words. What you'll have to do, because there was no sound on the video. So you have the link. So I encourage you to look on it. What you could see if you were watching it, you could see the results of words, positive, negative, life, love, as well as negative words on the different art items, different things. I mean, when you think about that and you think about us being mostly water and speaking negative words in your home and over each other, oh my. It's just death. Mm-hmm. So we have to be part of him dwelling within us and his presence dwelling us is one more time what we said at the beginning is we have to guard and we have to protect. That means we have to be vigilant. We have to be watchmen on the wall and we have to stop those things from being said and done in our lives and around those in his kingdom. And otherwise his house is destroyed and that's not what he wants. So let's go ahead and talk about the dreams for a minute. I'm going to also give a little bit different perspective. I've broken things down in previous years in detail in a different way before, but I want to break these down now, his dreams, according to Joseph and Yeshua. But I gave you guys a chart, and on that chart, I do not have everything listed. But we do see that Joseph was a shepherd initially, and of course, Yeshua is a good shepherd. We do see that he was loved by his father, and of course, Yahweh as well loved Yeshua. Yahweh is Yeshua, yes. He was anointed by his father with a coat. He was given a coat. And by the way, that coat was not just that tunic that hopefully we'll get time to talk about it. It was a priestly garment. So Joseph was supposed to carry the priesthood as well as be that firstborn. And so we have that idea too. So his brothers hated him. Well, of course, did people hate Yeshua? Yes, they did. And you can look at that chart. We're going to go over a few things here as you go over that chart yourself and break it down a little bit, because let's also go to the sheaves themselves. So let's start with that, because we're looking at his two dreams. Could one dream maybe represent the first coming when Yeshua came, as when Yeshua came the first time, not as the conquering king, but as Yeshua, you know? And could the other one represent him coming back in the second time? Because we have some elements there. We have in the dreams, we have the sheaves, and then the second one, we have the sun, moon, and stars. We have the earthly realm. Well, the second one really happens where? Does it happen on earth, or does it happen in the heavens? It happens in the heavens. And then we have, and he told, and of course, it says in the second dream, and he recounted. So maybe the first is when Yeshua came to earth, came into his own, and those people did not receive him. They were jealous of him. Remember, the Pharisees wanted to get rid of him from the very beginning. I mean, because they look, well, his crowds are bigger. He's taking the people away from us. What do they think they're doing? We don't like that. You go back to, even back to when we're talking about the priesthood, the Zadok priesthood, the priesthood that y'all put in charge. They didn't like what they had to say. How can you get around and do what you want to do and not have to follow the covenant? Remove those that are trying to keep the covenant that would try to correct you. Wow, that's done in Joseph's life. That's done back with the Zadok priesthood. I mean, and not just then. We see it happening throughout the time. In fact, let's kill all the little baby boys. We have Moses. It can happen. We happen again with Yeshua. So you remove that because jealousy is a theme in this Torah portion, but yet jealousy isn't new. It's been coming up all along. And it even says the brothers hated him. Well, what does it say about Yeshua? They hated him without a cause. They hated his words. They hated his speech. They hated his prophecies. They hated everything about him. Well, it's the same with Joseph. Did they want to hear his prophetic dreams? No. Did they want to hear what he had to say? Absolutely not. Did they want to hear anything from him? No. So as to how much favor was shown to him and the people that followed Yeshua, what do I mean by favor? Because there were miracles happening in Yeshua's congregations. There were miracles happening wherever Yeshua was. But there wasn't anything happening in the synagogues of where they ruled and reigned with their words, the Pharisees, Sadducees. And so they had the same feeling toward Yeshua as Joseph's brothers had for Joseph. The first time he came to earth, he was rejected, he was despised, and ultimately he was put to death. Now, you may say, well, Joseph wasn't put to death yet. That pit and the prison both represent death, and there's a resurrection that comes forth. Now, we have that the sheaf arose. And this is a picture of Yeshua's resurrection, possibly. Because remember, I said if we're looking at it from Yeshua's perspective, so that sheaf arose and it didn't go back down. He was resurrected. He's upright. So we know that Yeshua is returning, and when he does, the kingdom of heaven is going to be established on earth. And it's even more broad than that, because something heavenly is also occurring. Remember what the brothers asked of him? They said, the brothers, when he told them about the dreams, they're like, would you reign over us, Joseph? Would you? Would you dominate us? Those two words were used in the different dreams. So the two words are malak. And what does malak sound like? Does anybody? Malak, king. Yes, Daniel. Yes. That's where we get the word Melech, king. So now in the first dream, what you have is the opportunity. When Yeshua came the first time, you had a choice to follow him. You can follow him or not. But when he comes the second time, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. There's not a choice anymore, because he's the king of kings, Yah of Yahs. He is the great I am. There's not choice anymore. There'll be consequences. First time, choice. First dream, choice. Second time, because that word dominate, mashal, it's submission by force. So you have the first dream, you have that word that really represents a choice. The second dream represents that force, that mashal, that you can follow the king or not follow the king. You can move to a different kingdom if you don't like, but when someone dominates, you have no choice. So first coming, second coming. Choice, no choice. Now, let's look at the word sheaf. It's aluma, and it's number 485, and it means something bound, a sheaf. And the root alam, sheaf, number 485, something bound. Oh, that should bring our attention right there. From the root alam, to bind or to be dumb, silent. Isaiah prophesies that the Messiah was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and he was silent. He didn't open his mouth. Now, when you have this word alam, it also means to be conceal, hide, or be hidden, be secret, to tie fast or be tongue-tied. And we first see it used in Genesis 37:7. So I also want you to understand when I say alam, A-L-A-M, it's not the olam, which is eternity, everlasting, forever, perpetual, ancient. It's because this word is spelled with an ayin, okay? So Joseph's sheaf arose, which speaks of that resurrection, but the second dream, there's no mention of a sheaf being cut down or rising up. So nothing rises. Why? Yeshua is not going to rise again. He's risen. He's already remained standing. So when Yeshua rose, he is Yah. He is God. There's no second death for Yeshua. He's king. There's no second resurrection. So of course, there's nothing that needs to rise up. A sheep doesn't need to rise up. So the first dream, only the brothers involved. But what's different about in the second dream, who's involved? Mom and dad, right? Or the sun and moon, right? As well as the stars. So the brothers and the parents are involved in that second dream. So in Yeshua's first coming, he came as a shepherd and he came as a king that we could choose to follow not. Yeshua, the son of David. David actually was anointed 2 times as king, if you guys remember. The first time he was a little boy. Well, not a little boy, he's a teenager. But what happened? Samuel came, he said, I want to see your sons. They presented all the sons but him because he was out in the field with the sheep shepherding. And he says, no, not them. And when he saw David, he's like, that's it. And then in private, he was anointed as king, just as a young man. So officially, he was king. He was anointed as king. But then the second time, David was anointed in Hebron and publicly in front of all of Israel. And everyone had to acknowledge that he was king. So do you see that? The difference? It was done in private first dream, and then everyone had to acknowledge. Everyone will have to acknowledge. Everyone will bow to him. Sun, moon, and stars. Second coming. Now, when we're looking at dreams, there's actually 2 methods of interpreting dreams. One's literally and one symbolically, and maybe it needs to be both. So we can deduce from the verses that the brothers interpreted Joseph's dreams literally. They understood sheaves and bowing down were symbolic of rulership. So they were offended because I'm going to go back to the reality TV shows out there, Survivor specifically, back in the day. Anybody that rises up that wants to be the leader, you know what happens to them?
They get voted out.
They get cut off because people don't want to be led. They want to be the leader. And unfortunately, we all need a shepherd, because without the shepherd, what happens to the sheep? The sheep are scattered and they go astray. Mm-hmm. So if the sheep's bowing down in Joseph's first dream were to be understood symbolically, they could be expressing the brothers' dependence on Joseph during the years of famine. Okay? Because they depended on him. He provided food for the world in the land of Goshen and the land of Goshen in Egypt. The sheaves are a symbol of also of produce and bread, lachem. And the sheep, remember that sheep that stood out, also can be referring to Joseph's rise in status. You could look at it that way. But specifically, I really want to gear us more towards Yeshua and Joseph. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can say that we have done in the past for the 2 dreams, but we want to go this other direction. So initially, they probably didn't understand the fullness of what those dreams meant. But we know that Jacob sent his son to his brothers. Was Yeshua sent to his brothers? Yes.
And his cousin.
When I'm talking brothers, I'm talking spiritual. He was sent out for the house of Israel, but not everyone received him, right? Though Joseph was the 11th son, he was still the firstborn. You may say, well, how did that happen? Well, it may have been too, this is sort of a side trail, is that number one, Rachel was the wife he intended to marry all along. And so her firstborn child would have been, if he wasn't deceived, would have been the firstborn child, period. And so he could have been looking at it that way, but he also could have looked at it as he's the one that's actually he's the one actually partaking of the word, because the other sons we see even Reuben. Let's look at the character of Reuben for a minute. Reuben, he did mess up. He slept with Bilhah, so he did mess up in that. But Reuben was a guy who always intended to do good, but he wasn't a guy of action necessarily. It's not saying he was a bad guy, but remember, he intended to rescue Joseph out of the pit, but he didn't do it. So I think sometimes courage lacked in Reuben. He intended to do the right thing, but it didn't happen. Again, we all are in this maturing process where we get better, and Reuben does mature. So, but then it makes me another side trail. If you're intending to do good, is that good? Does the law, if you lust after a woman in your heart, so it is as if you've committed adultery, does that also go through the other way if you intend? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that procrastination destroys. If it needs to be done, it needs to be done. You don't procrastinate, or it can bring destruction to your household. So Reuben, here you have him. We have Simeon and Levi. They go slaughter a whole city and then cause the rest of the family to have to take up the bow, to take up the sword, and go from city to city and defeat those that would rise up against them. And then we have, we can go down with the problems, but the bottom line is Joseph was the one at the time that was in the tents. He was the one studying. If we have seen over and over in the word, just because you're the first out of the womb doesn't mean you're one that would carry the blessing and that would carry the priesthood. Why? Because y'all's looking for the firstborn who would love him. And of course, now if we love Yeshua, we are the firstborn. So here we have this idea. There was a reason and a purpose probably in Joseph's thought, even by his son's plural action. So Yeshua came, and the leaders of Israel should have been looking for a Messiah, but they weren't looking for the kind of Messiah he represented. They wanted somebody to come with a sword and destroy and put them in the top position. Joseph didn't find his brothers where they were supposed to be, and Yeshua didn't find his people where they were supposed to be. They should have been ready and willing and waiting and listening and able to hear, but they didn't want to hear. They weren't spiritually in the position they should have been in, so they rejected him. So we have that same picture of Yeshua Messiah. Genesis 37:15 says, now so a certain man found him, and there he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what are you seeing? Not sure. We're going to hit that phrase. I probably should have waited on that. We'll hit that phrase again later because I want to get into more detail. But Yeshua is in the world. When Yeshua came, he was seeking his brothers, and they weren't where they're supposed to be. So let's look at Dothan. Now, if you know, it's a caravan route from Egypt to Syria. And Judah later suggested, let's sell Joseph to the Ishmaelite traders. Dothan is that place where Elijah's servant's eyes were opened, and he saw all of the angelic forces, the host, Yehovah Zavaot, there before him, and the horses and the chariots of fire. And we know the story. We're not going to get into that Elisha had prayed that his eyes were open. I've given you pictures of the area because I always find that interesting. I gave you some of the pictures of the area. I have more. But I always find it interesting to see the area now and what it might have envisioned, what it might have looked like at the time, because it's beautiful now. So Joseph found his brothers at a place called what? I don't know if it's in your notes. It's double well, two wells. Some might say two laws. With Yeshua, he found his brothers, the leadership of Israel, it covered with words that were full of man-made customs and rules. They were in a place they weren't supposed to be, and they were filling their life with words and practices probably that shouldn't even be. So when they saw Joseph from a distance, it says they plotted against him to put him to death. Was there a plot against Yeshua? Absolutely. In fact, it said when you read this, they plotted against him to put him to death. That's almost word for word that you read in the Gospels. So we see that the wicked actions of the brothers were actually ended up being the key to the prophetic words that he was given so that he could rule and reign. And some would call his position next to Pharaoh king, by the way. When you read it, they call him the king. Pharaoh's still number one, but he was king. I mean, he was in charge of the kingdom. And when you think about that,
Makes you think it was preordained, if you ask me.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. God knew exactly what was going to go down.
And if the enemies of Yeshua knew what it would actually do, would they have done the same thing? Well, of course, Yah knows the end from the beginning.
Probably.
So, but the bottom line is their plot and what they did to Yeshua to bring him down and to kill him caused him to be able to take the keys back from the enemy, all that the enemy had stolen in the garden, to take it back so that we could live victoriously, so that we have a way back. And so really the plot of those that would conspire against Yeshua and Joseph played into Yah's plan, because we are really silly if we think that our evil plots and plans, and I'm not meaning necessarily anybody that's listening, but even our fleshly, foolish plans can ever subvert what Yah wants to do with us.
Mhm.
He's going to find a way, and he's going to make a way, and he wins. We don't.
Right.
He wins. And I should get a hallelujah for that, because imagine if our will came and we're the ones that were in charge, and so we can't subvert his plan in any way. The cloak pasim, it's only found in one other story. Okay, that cloak pasim, and that is in 2 Samuel, and it's the story of Tamar. If you may wonder who Tamar is David's daughter, and she is said to wear a katana pasim, which that is what Joseph is wearing, katana pasim. And remember, it really represents royalty and kingship, as well as priest. It's priestly almost. But we see Tamar, David dressed his daughter in that, and his daughters probably. So it connects these two stories. And if you lay them side by side and compare them, we might see some similarities, because they took him and threw him in a pit, and now the pit was empty with water in it. And of course, if there's no water in it, they threw him in a place where there was no word. They threw him into a place where it was spiritually dry. So therefore, he had to rely completely on Yahweh to bring forth the living water out of his own belly, so that he could feed and fuel the nations in his life that went forward. Because around him in the world, in the field with the beast, because the beasts were surrounding him, and unfortunately, his very own brothers were acting as the beast at the time, there was only death. But Yah brings life where there is only death. So we see that this tomb is empty. They took him and cast him in the pit. The pit was empty. Well, Yeshua was put in a tomb. He was put in a place, and the tomb is now empty. Right. They sat down to eat a meal. Well, do we see a meal involved with Yeshua? John 18:28 says that then they brought Yeshua from Caiaphas into the praetorium, and it was early, and they themselves did not enter the praetorium, so they would not be defiled, because they were keeping their Passover. Now remember, they're keeping the Hallel, not the priestly calendar Passover. That's the Hallel Passover, because Yeshua partook of the priestly calendar Passover. So understand that. And that's, we've talked about that. If you've listened to our Zadok, our calendar series, our Zadok priestly calendar series, you'll go into that. If not, I encourage you to go listen to that. So Joseph was sold for silver. Does anybody know how many pieces?
30.
20, because Yeshua was sold for
30.
right. So
Is that inflation?
I think it's actually the price of a lad compared to a man. Actually,
Oh.
a lad. I use that word of a young one.
Mhm.
Anyway, I can't say that for sure, but that's a possibility. So we know Jacob tore his clothes and he put on sackcloth. Now, so Yaakov tore his clothes. Do we see anything torn in the story of Yeshua? It's not his clothes, because they did lots for his clothes, but we saw the veil. The veil was rent, and when Yeshua was crucified, the veil was rent from top to bottom, not bottom to top, top to bottom. Remember, that thing was like thick, like that. It's not something that you could easily rip. And when it is ripped in this way from top to bottom, it's as if Yah is actually rending his garment.
Spiritually, yes.
So saying, so he mourned for his son many days, is what the word says. Genesis 39, 1-2 says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. Now remember, Ishmael's family, okay, and the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man, and he was put in the house of his master. So here he's put in charge of his master's house. Well, Yeshua is in charge. He is Yah, and he is in charge of the master's house as well. No, I'm not going to do that yet. Yes, Daniel, here.
Doesn't the rending of one's garment disqualify them from serving in the priesthood?
Yes.
Mhm.
So then what does that say if Yah rent his own garment?
Well, it does say that. To me, it represents that the Melchizedek priesthood, the Levitical priesthood, yes, it's continuing, but the Melchizedek priesthood is which Yeshua reigns over. And when that garment was rent, remember, before, you and I and anybody, nobody could go into the temple. One time, it could be one person one time a year, but now we become that place, the Living Stones Tabernacle. So it changed. There's something that changed, that shifted. Now we can go into his presence. You have some Hebrew roots teachers that say, oh, you should never say that. But yet he tells us if we are, so he's supposed to dwell within us. If Yeshua is dwelling within us, then we are carrying the ark within us. And if that's the case, we are to carry his presence. Remember the beginning, I talked about dwelling in his presence. He's trying to find a place where he can dwell within us so that the Living Stones Tabernacle can reign and rule, to guard and protect his word, to make a place for his bride. So in a way, what is happening is saying, this isn't the way. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. I am the door. I'm the
Essentially
door.
passing the torch to Yeshua.
And if he's spiritual, we're spiritual. There's another realm that we're in when he's in us.
It was never, ever, so the original plan was never Levi. Levi was the backup plan. The original plan was for the firstborn to be the priests and kings. And you are a firstborn if you are living for him now and been grafted in. And everybody, Judah and everybody else, has to be grafted in, because Judah sinned that much more. It says in the word. All of us have fallen short. So we have this picture. Let's look at Perez and Zerach, because they can be a picture of the two comings of our Messiah as well. Because Yah put his hand in the world, but did he stay the first time? It's not in your notes, guys. Sorry. He came into the world, but did he stay? No. What happened with that? The baby put his hand out, and they put a scarlet bracelet or thread around him, and it came back in, and then another was born. What's that scarlet represent? It's a picture of death, but it's also a picture of blood. So instead of emerging fully and establishing his kingdom in the world the first time, which was never his plan, Yeshua withdraws, ready to come back as the conquering king. He brings light. He brings hope. And that's what we also see in Zerach, which means brightness, which means light. And then what do we do with Yeshua? We kill him and he withdraws, just sort of like those two babies, you know. Perez is born, the breach is born, and Zerach returns. Then Zerach returns. It's almost like Yeshua said, hey, my hands and feet, look at my hands and feet. Look at me. It's me. I was here before, but now I'm back. So in a way, sort of you have to take it apart a little bit, but you can sort of see that juxtaposition right there. And then if you look at it also, we see both of them and how they are in the line of Yeshua as well later down the road. So symbolic images, you can look at it more yourself later. Now, here's something else, is that he talks about the brothers come and say, after they kill the goat, they say, hey, can you identify this coat? They didn't ever say Joseph's dead. They said, can you identify this coat? I mean, if you see a bloody coat of your child, what are you going to assume? But Tamar says to Judah in this story, what does she say? Now, not the same Tamar, David's daughter. We're talking about Tamar, who was the wife of Judah's sons. And later he produces these sons through her. So Tamar uses the same phrasing. Can you identify this? Hey, Judah, you want me dead? Can you identify these things? Just a thought. Think about those two together. So Jacob, we know they killed a goat and put it on the garment. Okay, the garment that represents the priestly garment, that represents the head of the one who is supposed to carry on the firstborn blessing, the one that's supposed to carry on the firstborn duties. So you see the blood of a goat used there. But where do we see a goat used anywhere else? We see it used to cause Isaac to think other than he should. Well, no, I'm not going to say that. To cause Isaac to think that Jacob was Esau. We use it for Judah to deceive Yaakov, and then we see Tamar uses a goat to deceive Judah. So, and it's used by Yah as a substitute in Leviticus 16, the two Yom Kippur goats. So here we see the goat being used over and over. Genesis Rabbah 85:1 says, the fathers of the tribes were busy selling Joseph. Jacob was distracted in sackcloth and fasting, and Judah was busy taking wife. Meanwhile, the Holy One, blessed be he, was creating a light of Messiah. So I think it's very interesting that even there they're acknowledging Messiah is light, and that's what he's doing, because we see that he is light to the world. But yet Joseph, in his position of providing a way and providing food, and he was being a light in his own way too. And Joseph's ways were established in the kingdom. It wasn't the pagan ways, it was Joseph's ways. So Joseph is like Messiah, who is like Joseph, because he's rejected by his brothers. He goes among those who are out of covenant. He's hated without cause. He becomes a slave. He goes to prison. He's rejected. He lives humbly, persecuted life, just like Yeshua. And only through Yah can he do any of it, because he rises to a place to become the savior of the world at that time. And Yeshua is our savior. He is the very name Yeshua. So we see those very much alike. And I gave you some information on the baker, the cupbearer, and the goat and things. You can look at that on your own, because I want to get to a few other things. I want us to go to the wandering in the field. If you listen to Let Us Reason Together this week, you probably heard me speak of this, but we're going to go through it with a little bit more detail maybe. Because it says, don't go out to the field, don't walk on the road, for the enemy has a sword and there's a terror on every side, Jeremiah 6:25. Wouldn't it have been good if Joseph had known not to go out into the field? But yet, isn't that exactly where he needed to go? Because what good are we if we stay in our houses, if we stay in our congregations, and we never go out into the field? How can we be salt and light? How can we make disciples of all nations? How can we be effective in his kingdom to take back what the enemy has stolen? How are we supposed to take dominion if we don't go into the field? But unfortunately, in the field, there are wild beasts. Yeah. Unfortunately, the field is the world, and those beasts in our house and outside of our house are out to kill us, and they want to destroy what we're doing, or at least they want to destroy the message that we bring.
They're all around.
Yeah. So if Joseph had heard the words, maybe he would have done differently, but yet I don't think so, because if he was a man of the tents, he knew that it was to go beyond. He knew he had to save his house. The brothers weren't where they're supposed to be, and we've gone into other years of what those places are specifically in Hebrew, but it's his job. He's doing the will of the Father. His Father sent him. Does his Father know what's outside in that field? Absolutely. He knows the way the brothers feel, but he still sent him out there because the household needed saved. The household needs saved. So we know he sold to his brothers. He's framed by his master's wife, and he eventually makes it out. He doesn't return to his homeland. So there's a lot of things that actually end up happening to him. But we also know that there's this idea of descent that's happening to this household. We see it in their actions, but we know also that Hebron is the burial place of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Yaakov and Leah in their generations, and even Adam and Eve, the cave of Machpelah, the cave of doubles. And this valley, it's odd because Hebron is normally a place where you ascend, not descend. But in this journey, we see this descending of the family into Egypt. So Joseph's dreams were signs that something was already in motion, which is not a surprise because Yah knows, he knows us, he knows our hearts, he knows what happened yesterday, today, and forever. And so nothing's going to escape him. But when Joseph reached Shechem, what does he see? He sees a man in the field. He sees a man in the world. So let's look at this word field, which is Sadeh. And throughout creation, the beast is always associated with the field, which we've talked about. And where the word even comes from Adamah. Now, when we think of Adamah, I think of Esau even, because Esau is in the world. Esau is the red one. Esau is the one that goes back to the beginning of, when I was talking beginning of this Torah portion, is that he is abiding and residing and dwelling right with, he is establishing his kingdom dwelling and enthroning someone else in his life at the same time Joseph is doing, enthroning Yahweh. He's creating this dwelling place for Yah. And it talks about he wandered. Now, wandered we see with Hagar. You can, I'm not sure how many notes I gave you on that, but you can look up. The key, of course, says that when you see this word wandering here, toeh, it's a homophone for making a mistake. And he says Joseph's mistake was actually not remembering what kind of attitude the brothers in his own family have against each other. Cain and Abel, Isaac and Ishmael, his own dad and his uncle. There's been a war between brothers because there's a war in the two kingdoms. And so maybe at 17, and I'm not saying at 17 I would have had all that together, because I wouldn't have. Although I was pretty spiritually astute, but still, at 17, you don't know what you don't know. But he's out there. Maybe he should have thought, I'm going out to my brothers. And there, in my family history, brothers come up against brothers. Maybe I should make sure my armor is on and ready to go before I have a confrontation. And that's where this sage says that he made a mistake by not considering the conflict of the history of the brothers in the family and brothers. What happens? Well, we go back to the first story with Cain and Abel. It ends in violence and it ends in death. So when Joseph was in the field wandering, maybe he should have thought of that. And then you think about the field. It says that the blood cries out. Think about that. The blood cries out. The blood cries out for Yah. The blood cries out for that justice of Yah making things right. And Yah always gives us a choice to turn our lives around. But nonetheless, the brothers are in the field. They're in the world. They're not where they're supposed to be. And Joseph is sent out to them. Now, Shechem is where his brothers also killed the men. Remember that Simeon and Levi killed everybody. And so Shechem actually belongs, if you think about the way things sort of work back then, Shechem was defeated by Yaakov and his sons. So Shechem is his territory, actually. And what is Joseph doing? He is sent out. So Joseph is going out to do the will of the Father, and he's going out for the protection of the Father. If Joseph is the type of Yeshua, and Jacob is an example of the Father is sending the Son to his brothers. Oh my goodness, that goes right back to what we were talking about with Yeshua. So Joseph is going out to check on his brothers. He is going out to them, and they hate him for it. They abhor him for it. So Joseph comes to his brothers who hate him, just as Yeshua's brothers hated him. Now he saw a man. Okay, he sees this guy. So also, we see that Joseph represents the 10 northern kingdoms. There's that number again, 10. And he's the shepherd of his own house. He's a shadow picture of the shepherd looking for his sheep, because Messiah came as the good shepherd. He comes out to reunite the two sheepfolds, right? He comes for his sheep. In fact, it says the sheep know their master's voice intimately. They know that voice well. Among a whole bunch of other shepherds, they could recognize and identify the shepherd. So Joseph is a type of shepherd going out and going out to check on his father's sheep. Why? Because his brothers are to be tending his father's sheep. But in reality, the sheep have no shepherds. They're doing their own thing. Well, look at today. We look at so many people, and we are a people that don't have a lot of shepherds. Now, I'm not talking in the Hebrew roots Messianic community where everybody thinks they need to be a shepherd. Oh, I did just say that on purpose.
Truth hurts.
Because, okay, a rabbit trail. The one thing that is hard is that in the Messianic community, if you get a little bit of Torah knowledge, then you think you need to go lead a group. And a teacher is going to be held far more accountable. And you may say, well, what about you guys? You know what? I will tell you this. Okay, side trail. Life of Worship came into existence in 2005 after we'd been pasturing other congregations for some time. And I was very much against us starting our own. We knew that it was going to eventually happen, but I didn't want to do it because I knew persecution that comes from, just as a pastor filling in for other pastors for years. I knew that. John went to Bible school. I went to Oral Roberts University. You know, we've been in ministry. I've been doing ministry since 1986 and teaching and preaching since 1990. That's a lot of math. So that dates me. Yes, it does. But it's hard stuff. And we did not come in. Our congregation, Life of Worship, was always told, you are the guys that do Hebrew and you're the guys that worship a lot. And you're missing. And we'd have people come in and say, you're missing. Like I said, I don't even know. No, we're not. We just want the truth. And so, but nonetheless, so many people haven't put in the work. Not that you have to. Y'all can change and make it in a minute. But we have a lot of people that want to lead and they don't know the price. They haven't paid the price, and therefore the sheep end up paying the price later down the road, because it's hard to be a shepherd. It's hard, super hard. It's so hard.
Yeah.
So anyway, off that rabbit trail. But the father wanted his flocks checked on. Our Father wants our flocks checked on.
That's right.
And that goes back, who's dwelling in us? What spirit is dwelling within us? What spirit is reigning within us? So as we've talked about, people want to destroy authority, and that's what the brothers really wanted to do. They didn't have to even they could have put him in the pit and sold him without all of that, but that's not what they chose to do. They took off the coat, which is very prophetic, because Yeshua's clothing was removed. Think about that. And they tried to remove his authority because Yeshua's robe represented authority. Remember, it was an uncut robe, and that's a priestly robe. It's uncut. I don't know if you guys we've talked about that before, but Joseph's robe represented the same thing. So his father sent him out, and we've always got to remember that violence lurks in the fields, but we've got to remember that we need to be under true shepherds, because sometimes shepherds can be wolves. They can eat their flock, but sheep just as much eat the shepherds too. Mm-hmm. Sheep are shepherd eaters.
Oh,
yeah. They're carnivore in that way.
But they don't have teeth for grass.
Okay. You know what I'm talking about, Pastor John.
You got to chew.
So what was
they
Jacob?
Chew harder than for flesh.
So Jacob's motivation was he really wanted his flocks checked on. Where are my people? And it represents what Yah wants, because they represent the shepherds of Israel that have become the lost tribes. They are shepherding the father's flock, the father's sheep, but they're not really doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not where they're supposed to be, and they're not feeding their sheep. And so they strip those of authority. And history is going to repeat itself over and over again. And we need to remember that. It's happening today too. Yeah, Connie says the sheep are shepherd eaters. Yeah. So, sorry guys, I haven't been able to check on what's been in chat. I hope Pastor John has, so if there's good stuff. So the field actually represents where all the work is to be done. Joseph had to go to the field. He had to face what he's going to face. And all of those things caused him to become the man he's going to be and supposed to be. And so all of the experiences we have cause us to be who we're supposed to be. What are we supposed to be? We're supposed to dwell and make a place for his presence. And then we are to occupy and remember who we are, no matter what the trial, though others rise up against us and try to call us names and try to destroy our character, we still remain focused on him, knowing that he takes vengeance if vengeance needs to be taken. And to be sure that we follow his will and his way in all things. And I'm going down my notes, and actually have so many more things to be said. We're almost at time, and I want to leave. We didn't even get to tomorrow like I wanted to. But I want to leave time for some of you guys there hasn't been to comment, both online and offline. Are there some things you want to look at real quick and discuss? And maybe we can delve into those, because this Torah portion, we've just covered such a small amount, but yet it's still good, and there's so much more to go. So there's some things that you guys want to bring up. They don't have to be in your notes, just from this Torah portion.
Well, Connie asked the question about are the sheep eaters or the shepherd eaters, the sheep are shepherd eaters, and are they purple?
Okay,
and
she's
and
like,
she
are they
said,
purple people
so
eaters?
Linda says purple people eaters. So
okay, but that's not exactly what I meant. So, one thing I wanted to go into today was the spices. The spices that they were trading. To me, that's going to be an interesting study. So I may just have to do that do that soon. We're considering putting another, maybe a Monday night thing online where we used to gather for Monday night Torah talk. We're considering doing it online, and instead of I mean, we could gather too, I guess, and maybe I could discuss some things like that so we could come together.
So Tammy put in here, Joseph inherited the land where he was sold into slavery.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Just as Yeshua will inherit Jerusalem where he was sold and crucified.
That's true.
That's a good point.
Anything else, guys? Shannon?
I've just been holding on to this for quite some time. Whenever you were talking about, help me here, get started. My grandmother used to always have this saying whenever I was growing up about be careful about what you say and do, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yep.
See, that goes back to what I said about Reuben. Reuben had good intentions, but he didn't follow through.
Exactly. And I don't know, to me, that's saying that, we shouldn't be, as the character of Reuben, we should not be just, shy and timid. We need to jump out there and do something about whatever's going on. Don't just be, I intended to say this or do that or whatever, and then don't do it and then just let it go.
It's true.
That's really interesting, because if you put it, there's a couple different podcasts I listen to, and these are different lawyers. And one of the things that we have to look at is when this issue of intent.
Mm-hmm.
What do you intend to do? Well, in order to prove that someone is guilty of a crime, you have to have intention. Well, the issue that they, all of these January 6ers is there's an element that intent was never proven. Intent, like all these things that they accused President Trump of, is that there wasn't this element of intent. So they use false witnesses. And so what I'm thinking here is that, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, is the very fact that, is our crime in following Yeshua backed? Not only do we have intent and action, you got to have both of them to be properly accused of that crime of following Yeshua. And I think a lot of times is that people will have intentions of following Yeshua, but they have no actions that follow through on those intentions, and therefore are not guilty. And I'm kind of using that reverse order. They're not guilty. They're not guilty of following Yeshua. They are just simply observers. They're out there in the stands. They're part of the audience. They say they're one thing, and yet they're not, because they have intent, but maybe they don't have the action. So therefore they're not guilty of that crime. And Reuben exemplifies that. But I think about that a lot with our own lives. We come and we gather. We come and we do these things, but do we fulfill the purpose when we walk out of here? Do we have the intent of saying, oh, this week I am going to be more exemplary of being a believer and a follower of Yeshua? We have the intent of doing that when we leave, but when we come back the next week, was anything different that week than it was the week before? Did we have actions that followed up with the intent by which we could say, oh, you're guilty of following Yeshua this week? Do we do that? Do we walk that out? And so that's why Hasatan is the accuser of the brethren. Why? Because he can sit there, well, you got all these intents, but you do nothing. And then what do? Then we walk around in shame, or we walk around in guilt. We say, oh, I'm not a good enough follower. I'm not doing these things. And yet the pattern never changes. Because the next week we come around, well, do we have a testimony to share? Do we have some type of interaction that we had with people outside of our safe group where we're able to give a testimony to say, look what y'all did. Or, you know, at least I broke out of my shell and I did something. Maybe I didn't see an immediate result, but at least I broke out of my shell. I'm doing something. So my intent meets action, and that action is at least planting a seed. And so I think that's one of the things that we all need to ponder and consider is, are we doers of the word, or hearers only? Yeah, some really good point that you brought out. It just made me think about some things that way.
It also made me think about some other things too, because we really, I'm speaking to myself more than anybody because I'm terrible. If we don't take action as far as what our intentions actually are, then the enemy will take over, and he's going to be doing something just the opposite of what you intended to accomplish in the first place. And you remember the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
And they got to the point to where they could judge what somebody was going to do before they ever did it. And they would go and arrest this person or whatever, and maybe that's not really even what they intended to do. But
pre-crime.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have to be real careful about, and be sure that your motives are, correct before you act on them.
Yeah.
Because.
So that really kind of brings up another, a really, really good point that I want to emphasize on what you're saying is that nothing that we do is in a vacuum. So our inaction is not in a vacuum, as if there's no alter effects, that as if nothing results from our inaction. It is filled with the work of Hasatan. If we've just left it, apathy, complacency, all of those things have results. They bear fruit.
Yes.
It's just the enemy uses it to bear fruit for his kingdom.
And we can't cow down if he puts us, and he will set things up if you let him. You can't cow down with your beliefs. I mean, if he brings up a way to bring it up, you better jump in there. And, it's like my cousin and my sister and a couple of their friends are meeting for Christmas Eve, and she's like, "You want to come over?" She said, "We're not going to open up gifts under the tree." I said, "No." I said, "I really can't do that because you've still got the tree in there. It's still what the tree represents. It's still the spirit of the thing." And at first she kind of, I could tell in her voice, she was, but she got fine with it. It's the same thing if we're walking out there in the world. If he sets it up and you need to speak something, you better speak it in, because you may be the only seed that is spread that person needs to get, And the warfare is bloody out there. I mean, the field is bloody, but who washes us? Who washes us after we go through? And I mean, when you go into the field and you're around people that don't have a clue where you're at, and you may go in the field and get a little bloody. Well, don't forget you're coming out of there, and he's going to clean you up. He'll clean you up every time. Yes. If you seek him and you ask him.
Yeah. Very cool. So, Connie, Viva Fry. Yeah, he's pretty cool. Just want to say that's one good Canadian that has broken free from our great communist friends in the North and made it to the wonderful state of Florida. So he's one of them. Robert Barnes is another one. Very, very good. Very knowledgeable. And Robert Govea does a really good job as well. So those are just some plugs of some of these attorneys that I listen to that have broken free and think they're just good people, good attorneys out there.
Yes.
So, all right.
Well, I guess that's the tour portion for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it and got something out of it. I love gathering with my family. So we will gather together again at 3 p.m. Central. So adjust your time accordingly. Let John close us out and pray and thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Father, we just bless you and we thank you for our gathering and we thank you for the Torah portion. The Father, the things that you bring revelation to, and those things that we can chew on and we can ponder, and the things that shape our lives and spur us to love and good works. And that's really the bottom line is to be able to take these things and which transforms us, which puts a fire into our engine to perform, to go out in the power of and the anointing of your Holy Spirit. And that's what we want to do, is to be a light for your kingdom and a light in this world.
That's right.
So, Father, let your light shine in us, and let that fire not grow dim, but increase all the more as we see that day drawing close. And we just honor you and bless you for it in the name of Yeshua.